All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that shapes pretty much everything we do, every single day, and most of the time we don't even notice. We're talking about cognitive biases. You can think of them as these little glitches in our thinking that quietly steer our judgments, our beliefs, and our biggest decisions, even when we're trying our absolute best to be logical. So let's just start with a huge question, right off the bat. Is your brain actually designed to trick you? I know, it sounds a little dramatic, doesn't it? But in a strange way, it's kind of true. Our brains are these incredible machines, for sure, but they also have some built-in quirks that can seriously lead us astray in the modern world.
And to really get why, we have to talk about your brain's hidden shortcuts. Look, our minds are bombarded with an insane amount of information every second. So to cope with all that, they create these super fast, efficient little pathways to make sense of the world without getting totally overwhelmed by every single detail.
Now, these shortcuts, you might hear them called heuristics, are basically survival tools. They're brilliant. They helped our ancestors make those split-second calls, like whether that sound in the grass was a deadly predator or just the wind. But here's the catch. In our complex, modern lives, those same life-saving shortcuts can end up distorting how we see reality, and they cause us to make the same kinds of mistakes over and over again.
So, if these shortcuts can backfire and lead to errors, what exactly are we talking about? Well, that brings us right to the main event, decoding cognitive biases. These aren't just random slip-ups or, being in a bad mood. They are predictable, repeatable patterns in the way we think.
And the key word here, the one you really got to remember, is systematic. See, a cognitive bias isn't a one-off mistake. It's a predictable way our thinking strays from what's perfectly rational. And it all stems from our brain's constant effort to simplify everything. It's a core feature of our operating system, not a bug, but it's a feature with some pretty serious side effects.
And this really gets to the heart of it all. On one side, you have these helpful heuristics, those mental shortcuts that save us a ton of time and energy. But when we use them in the wrong context, they flip over and become these distorting biases, these systematic errors that can actually make us believe things that just aren't true. It's a really fine line between being efficient and being wrong.
Okay, so what do these thinking traps actually look like out in the wild? Let's do a quick run-through of 5 of the most common ones. As I'm going through them, just see if any of them, feel a little familiar. Be honest with yourself.
First up, the big one, confirmation bias. This is our natural instinct to hunt for information that proves we're right while conveniently ignoring anything that suggests we might be wrong. Next, anchoring bias. Ever see a shirt marked down from, say, $300 to $150 and think, wow, what a deal? You've just been anchored to that first higher price. Then we have the availability heuristic. This is where dramatic, easy-to-recall examples mess with our judgment. We hear way more about plane crashes than car crashes, so flying can feel way scarier, even though it's statistically much, much safer. Oh, and don't forget the halo effect. This is where one good trait, like someone being really good-looking, tricks us into thinking they're also smart, funny, and kind. And finally, there's the self-serving bias, which is basically our own internal PR agent. When we succeed, it's because of our amazing skill. When we fail, the test was unfair or it was just bad luck.
So, okay, we've got these little glitches in our thinking. So what? Do they really matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, the answer is a huge resounding yes. These biases can have massive consequences, especially when the stakes are high. Let's walk through a classic example.
Okay, so picture this. It's a totally normal situation. You've got a hiring manager, and they're trying their best to be completely objective while interviewing someone for a really important job.
They're making small talk, and the candidate just happens to mention where they went to college. Seems like a pretty harmless little detail, right? But here's the twist. It just so happens to be the exact same university the hiring manager graduated from. And boom, instantly, there's a connection. But hold on, is it actually a relevant connection?
In that single moment, a couple of biases can just roar to life. The halo effect might put this positive glow on everything else the candidate says. And something called similarity bias makes us automatically like people who are like us. Together, they create this instant, totally unearned trust, and the manager might start, without even realizing it, ignoring the candidate's weaknesses and only focusing on their strengths. all because they share an alma mater.
And that leaves us with this really crucial question. With these hidden forces pulling the strings in the background, how objective can that final hiring decision really be? It's entirely possible the best person for the job was just passed over, all because of a simple mental shortcut.
Okay, I know. This all might sound a little discouraging. If our brains are just wired this way, what can we possibly do about it? Well, the good news is we are not powerless here. We can absolutely learn to manage our biases, and here's a practical, step-by-step toolkit to help you do exactly that. It all starts with awareness, which, hey, is exactly what you're doing right now. You can't fight an enemy you can't see. Next, you have to actively challenge your beliefs by going out and looking for opposing views. This is the perfect antidote to confirmation bias. Then, a simple one: slow down. Biases absolutely love it when we're rushed. Just pausing to think denies them the fuel they need. Then, use structure. A simple pros and cons list or a checklist forces your brain to get out of its lazy, automatic mode. Try to shift your perspective by really truly trying to see the situation from someone else's shoes. It helps break you out of your own little bubble. And finally, be accountable. Just knowing you'll have to explain your reasoning to somebody else is a super powerful way to push yourself to make a more thoughtful, objective choice.
So what's the end goal with all of this? Look, it's not about trying to become some perfectly rational, emotionless robot. The goal is actually much more human and, thankfully, much more achievable than that.
I think this quote just says it perfectly. Biases aren't about being stupid or irrational. They're part of being human. This really gets to the core of it. Having biases doesn't mean you're unintelligent. It just means your brain is working exactly the way it was designed to.
And so, the real takeaway here is this. The objective isn't to somehow get rid of all our biases. That's probably impossible anyway. The real goal is to just recognize them, to be aware of them, and to manage their influence so that we can make decisions that are a little wiser, a little fairer, and a lot more informed. It's really just about adding a layer of deliberate thought right on top of our automatic instincts. And that brings us to one last thought to leave you with. Now that you know about some of these common thinking traps, here's a question for you. Which bias do you think influences you the most? Seriously, just taking a moment to think about that? That's the very first step toward making your next decision an even better one. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.